With me now, as promised, is our special guest today, Mr. Gordon Sheehan, who worked as an animator on Gulliver's Travels. Gordon, could you just start out by telling us how you got started on the project with Gulliver?
I was working with Max Fleischer in New York City in 1937 when Walt Disney was producing Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. When it opened at Radio City's Music Hall, it was the first, by the way, it was the first animated cartoon feature in the world. And the crowds that went to see the picture were enormous. It broke all records at Radio City Music Hall.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my boss, Max Fleischer, was much more experienced in animation as year-wise than the producer of Snow White, Walt Disney. And I guess he got encouraged to make his own, make an animated feature also. And Paramount, who distributed Max's short subjects, the Popeyes and the Betty Boops, also kind of backed him on this idea.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Max had a favorite story that he liked since he was a boy, Gulliver's Travels. And so he decided that, he and of course his staff decided that he would make a feature out of Gulliver's Travels. Now, the getting what they called a safe building, a fireproof building in New York City was almost impossible. And this is one of the big reasons why Max Fleischer decided to move to Miami, Florida. That and some encouragement from the state of Florida, tax-wise, benefits and whatnot. And there were various other reasons. Max liked to winter in Miami Beach, so it sort of fitted in with his personal ideas. But he decided to move the whole studio and their families to Miami, Florida to make the feature Gulliver's Travels. Mm-hmm. And also, of course, to continue making Popeye and Betty Boop shorts.
What role did you really have in getting started on animating with Gulliver?
Well, when we moved to Miami and I started working on Gulliver, the first thing that I did, Max called me into his office and started talking about rotoscoping Gulliver. Now, Paramount wanted to use live scenes of the Gulliver character and interpose them with the cartoon characters. They wanted to use a young actor that they had on their payroll at that time, a fellow named Gary Cooper.
Oh.
Max held out for a process that he had invented 20 years previous to this, called the rotoscope process.
A lot of the other characters, the Lilliputians and others, they're just much more caricatures of people than the rotoscoping. Was that a reason? Was that the reason that they limited rotoscoping to the main characters, sort of separate them?
I think the main reason they they limited the rotoscoping to Gulliver. They wanted Gulliver to look like a human, and these other characters were the dream world someplace. They were made up fictitious.
Mm-hmm.
They wanted to make a difference between them. By the way, that the first shot of Gulliver coming out of the water, I had the privilege of doing. I didn't use the rotoscope process for that. I used a moviola.
Oh.
And the action of Gulliver, in that case, we didn't use the Sam Parker who we used later.
Uh-huh.
We used one of the animators, a fellow named Nelson Demarest. And they took Nelson over to Miami Beach one stormy day and had him swim in through the waves and come up on the shore and fall down. And I got that piece of film and a pile of paper and was told to animate the first scene. And I didn't do it by tracing, but by doing it more or less every 3 or 4 frames. I would look in the moviola, get Nelson's action, and then make a drawing of it. And then I'd turn another 2 or 3 frames on and make another drawing until I had the full scene done. It took me about 2 months to do a scene that when you see the picture, you'll see it go by in about 2 minutes or so.
Uh-huh.
Then he's found by this little fellow, Gabby, the Lilliputian, who was the town crier and the night watchman, more or less, and he's going along singing, and he stumbles over Gulliver's finger on the beach, and then that's when he realizes that something's wrong, and he goes and alerts the king. But Gabby is prominent all through the picture, and he's probably the best animated character, and really he stole the show, according to most critics and people that saw the movie.
Yeah.
Why do they make me sing that song? The poet who wrote it was certainly wrong. It's bright ahead, go right ahead. I'd rather go home and go right to bed.
Was Gabby your favorite character in the film?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think he was everybody's favorite character. He had the most of the action, the good action, and
the comedy
was much more interesting than the others.
I see you brought with you some of the animation cells. It'd be interesting for people to see how this is done, what we start with in drawing before they transfer it onto film.
Yeah, well, all of our drawings are done originally in pencil on animation paper. And then they're traced onto acetates, transparent acetates, that are the same size as the paper. They're traced on with an ink that sticks to the cell, and then they're inked on the front of the cell, and then painted on the rear of the cell.
Oh.
With a special paint that adheres to celluloid. Ordinary paint will chip off very soon, but this type of paint's been on there a long time, and it'll probably be on there for a lot longer.
How many cells would be used for, say, every second or for a minute of animation, do you know?
Well, it's a little difficult to say. The speed of a film going through the projector, of course, is 24 frames a second. So that means 24 separate pictures per second. But in some cases, you might have 3 or 4 cells at one time on. You see, they might have part of the figure that is held and part that is moving. Maybe something is moving in the background like a bird or a tree or something. And so sometimes you'd have a buildup of 3 or 4 or 5 cells. So
overlapping each other?
Overlapping. And that was particularly true in Gulliver because they didn't spare any expense. They made it as fancy as they could. And they went a little overboard at times, but they didn't spare any work or expense.
Here we have, this is King Bombo?
No, this is the King Lilliput.
That's right.
He's a nice little king. In fact, he's a little too nice. But we have a rival of his, King Blefuscu, of Blefuscu. And he is a warlike king.
Let's get some of the other cells you have over here, a couple of the prince and princess themselves.
This is the prince and the princess.
Now these are 2 separate cells, but this is what they...
Yes, we move these around a little bit here. But
this is how several cells would be used together for one shot.
That's right.
Combining characters.
And sometimes we would use maybe 4 or 5 thicknesses of cells.
Oh, really?
We couldn't use too many because, as you see, the cell has a certain cast to it, and it gets darker. The character on the bottom gets darker the more cells you put on top. So we had to be very careful of that.
We've also got one of Gulliver himself over here.
Yes, Gulliver. This, I believe, was taken from one of the rotoscope drawings where he's holding Gabby in his hand.
No, that's right. You can see the difference between the Gulliver character and the prince and princess and Gabby.
That may be forced a little bit, but I guess it's about right. Gabby, in proportion to Gulliver, was about, he would fit on the palm of his hand.
We'll be right back to talk more with animator Gordon Sheehan about his work on Betty Boop, Superman, and Popeye cartoons after this.